There are earthquakes happening all over the world all the time. This morning alone, already today, there were 2 earthquakes that measured 5 point and above. Already, just today, 2 earthquakes, 5 point and above. Immensely powerful tectonic shifts that happen on this planet that reshape the planet that is our home, that reshape the ground on which we stand, on which we walk, that we assume sometimes will be stable, when all the time it's really not. Today, this morning, there's an earthquake of sorts. Our very own earthquake, right here. Right here, if you're listening. It's the wisdom of our church, it seems, that this is the feast of a king. One of the greatest feasts of the year, the feast of Christ the King. And on this feast of a king, the church chooses the gospel of a crucified and condemned man. What is this seeming paradox? How can this work? These plates are crashing against each other. A king crucified, a king all-powerful, and a Lord all-powerless. This is an earthquake of sorts. It harkens back to that earthquake that Matthew records that occurred upon the death of Jesus, this abandoned man. An earthquake happened that day, literally. And I think you know, in the Jewish temple, there was this heavy curtain over the Holy of Holies that kept people from God and God from people. It made God this unknown mystery, unknowable mystery, immense and totally other. But with this death of this condemned, powerless man, that temple of the curtain was torn. It was torn open and shredded once and for all, so that we can see God now, you and I, in this condemned man, so that we can know God now, you and I, in this powerless, pathetic victim. Yes, there was an earthquake that day, literally, the story tells us. And it tore something away once and for all. And now, because of that death, you and I have absolute, total access to everything we call God. That day, that afternoon, the mystery we call God was revealed like never before. And my friends, this is the stuff of earthquakes. Because if we're listening, if we're looking, it really shakes up. It really shakes up so much of our understanding of God, so much of what we presuppose to be true of God. We say God is all powerful. As I mentioned at the beginning of Mass, that's one of the doctrines of our church. But what is revealed here that day, that afternoon, is nothing of what the world calls power. Power is defined in our culture as a forceful, controlling influence. Power is thought of in our culture as power over or power up against. And that's nothing like the power that was revealed that afternoon, that day, on that hillside, in that abandoned man. Nothing. And if that is your understanding of what power is, then that doctrine is lying to you. If that's how you conceive of power, then God is not all powerful in that way, with that notion of things. No, this is a different kind of God we believe in and trust and worship and honor today. This is a different notion of power. Unlike anything else. Stronger even than force. You know as well as I do how over history totalitarian regimes and tyrants and kings tried to force a behavior change on their subjects. You know how that worked. They could make them march lockstep all the time. They could make them change their behavior for sure with the threat of force. But you know there's one thing they could never change, that they were never strong enough really to ever change, and that was the human heart. No tyrant, no totalitarian regime, no king ever had the power, the true power, the power to change a human heart, ever. But this love can. This love did. That power alone, the power of powerless love alone, can change the human heart. And one of the first people changed was a thief who was humble enough to know that he did wrong, that he was paying the price for his choices. That was the first heart changed by this powerless love. And it has been one heart after another, to this day, to this very hour, to this little chapel here in Clayton, Missouri. This is a crucified love that did not compel the good thief to change, but it was strong enough to change him. And look what did it. This is the stuff of earthquakes, my friends. Earthquakes in our understanding of the true nature of God, of who God is, of a God who is powerless love. A crucified and powerless love. And so, because I was raised in this culture with definitions of words that you grew up with as surely as I did, when I pray here and say, holy, holy, holy Lord God of power and might, and in other ways throughout this liturgy and every liturgy of our church, I have to do sort of a mental somersault in myself when I hear the word power. I have to say to myself, powerless love. That's what I mean. When I say all-powerful God, I am saying powerless love. When I say Lord of power and might, I am saying to myself, powerless love is the strongest force in the world, which is the exact opposite of what you and I tend to think when we think about power. My friends, we got to get this right. We got to start getting this right. I am weary of the number of people who do a number on themselves because their notion of God is not real. It's an illusion rather, and it's not serving them well. As a matter of fact, it's hurting them, and it's hurting their faith, and it's getting in their way, and we got to get this right. Of course, I can say to myself, they didn't get it right in his day either. The apostles kept getting it wrong. That's why one of them turned him in. But maybe after 2,000 years we can start getting it right. 3 conversations just this week I had, 1 online, 2 in person. One young person said to me after a difficult breakup, well, I guess God has reasons for this breakup, huh? And I looked at him and I thought, God didn't do this. God didn't do this to you for a reason, to teach you a lesson. That's not how God works. Oh, God can bring us through, and we can look back on it, even be grateful for a horrible experience like a breakup, or even a death, because we learned so much from it, but that's God on the other side. God doesn't make bad things happen to you. God doesn't even allow bad things happen to you so you learn a lesson. Is that a God you want to believe in? Would a loving parent do that to their kids if you could fix it? Would you allow your kids to be brutally, verbally attacked on a playground so they can learn something? You wouldn't do that. Why are you doing that to God? And what it's costing is people stop believing in Him. They can't stomach this notion of the divine. And again, too often I run into people who stop believing in God over this stuff, who leave the church over this stuff, rejecting God because they cannot reconcile a God who would do or even allow such great suffering and such great injustice in the world. There's something not right in this understanding of things. And I go so far as to say it's even dangerous, because we become what we worship, you and I. We're in the image and likeness of God. And if the God we imagine is all-powerful in the sense of power over and power against, a triumphant, victorious God, then we're going to fight like crazy to be triumphant and victorious ourselves. And we won't know what to do with failure, morally or in any way. And so there's war after war after war because we don't get it. We create ourselves in the image and likeness of a God who doesn't even exist. That's the earthquake. We're missing who God really is. A while back, I met a woman, a long time ago now actually, I met a woman who was abused, severely abused, by her very own father and her uncles as well. For a long time, that abuse continued. And she would say, God, why? Why would you let this happen to me? If you love me and if you care about me, why would you allow this to go on? It's a valid question if that's how you understand God. Why would God allow that to go on over those years? She asked it again and again. She fell away from the church. She fell away from faith. And then one day she was scrubbing the bathroom floor. She was scrubbing the bathroom floor, and she was getting vicious with the tiles on the floor. And she said it again, even in her lack of faith this time. Why, God? Why did you let this happen to me? And she heard this sort of a voice on the inside that just kind of said, if I would have forced them, I would be no better than them. They who forced you. I would have been like them if I forced them to anything. I don't want to be like them, God said to her. That's not who I am. I don't force. That woman fell in love with God again that day on the floor of her bathroom. She came to understand that God is like her, that God understands what it's like to be a victim. It's not God's fault. God was suffering with her and helping her through it, even to that day, scrubbing the tiles of her bathroom floor. When Jesus was hanging on that cross, the gospel today tells us, they were shouting out, save yourself, save yourself. You can do this. You have the power. You're God, right? Save yourself. And he said, no, that's not power. I can't. I won't. He didn't. If he could have taken the sword to make them go away, he didn't. He couldn't. That's not who God is. That's not how God works. We got to get this right. The power of a powerless love is the ultimate power in the universe, because it has power to change human hearts alone. And it's when we're most like God, when we experience that powerlessness. I think it's why when we meet a truly humble person who doesn't force or coerce or doesn't need to control everything and manipulate others to their ends, when we meet a truly humble person, we have this sense that there's something else going on here, something that is God. In humility, we meet that. And a humble person has the power to affect us more than the noble and more than the ones with titles who dictate what should be done or not. That humble woman or man, they can change our hearts. Do you get it? When you sit beside the bedside of a person who's dying, or you encounter somewhere along the way somebody who's truly suffering, that something stirs inside of you when you see that something is God. The powerless one, by the world's understandings of power. The truly powerless one. You got to struggle with this. You got to come to grips with it, you and I, because this is big stuff. Each day there are earthquakes on this beautiful planet that are reshaping the ground on which we stand. But nothing reshapes that ground more than that image right there. Nothing. That's what a king looks like, really, in this understanding of things. And I dare say, that's the only king. There is no other king worth our allegiance, our lives. None.